and we are live. Hopefully, you guys are having a great Friday today. We're going to be going over the top stocks for this upcoming election week. Absolutely seeing some huge movements in the market in anticipation of the election. I'm going to show you guys what we have in store for this week. As you guys know, we focus here on tech and AI stocks. So we're here on the Robinhood platform, Robinhood Legend. I have TSLL, which is the 2x times of Tesla right here. But we're not going to be going over, we're not going to start there. We're going to start here with NVIDIA. So NVIDIA really looking like a similar. There's a couple things that if we don't identify here with the potential election impact, and we're not really looking at the patterns. If you don't do those things, you could have a tough time really investing in NVIDIA over the next few weeks. The government is definitely going to be favorable to tech innovation and AI. So that could be an increased investment in AI infrastructure, which is going to be benefiting NVIDIA. Conversely, we got a heightened regulatory environment, right, that could introduce compliance costs and potentially be affecting their market expansion, right? But we know NVIDIA is supplying all the chips for Apple, right? You have your MacBook, your iPhone. They're supplying all the chips for that. You have a lot of AI companies that are going and using NVIDIA. You also have Tesla, right? So with Optimus, their robot, as well as their cars, you have them using NVIDIA. So the market cap right now is approximately it's over $1 trillion. Let's just put it that way. It's as they've been growing significantly, they've really been dominating that GPU market. And so when we look at what the trends kind of look like here on the near term, this is just the past day. We see it kind of we saw it sell off aggressively from being at an all-time high. And then now we're seeing it start to potentially push up. And what we have here is now this new trend, right? It could be breaking pattern. We see it push up. As you guys could see in the past few days, we had this EMA really acting as a resistance, had a little bit of a break above, but really it's been submerged below this moving average. You can see the moving average kind of showing you where it's getting rejected, right? And then just recently we had it break above. Now this moving average it's starting to act as a support. We saw the MACD was a bit overextended. The RSI was looking, on the oversold side, and then now we're seeing it maybe continue this upward trend. And actually, we saw some divergence here. So divergence is when you look on the RSI or the MACD, you might have it peak out here at the same price. This is the same price level right here. But when you look on the MACD, you can see it peaked out, and then this lower low right here still didn't have as much momentum, and it's actually showing signs of a reversal of a divergence that we're going to see it continue its upward direction. Now that's kind of on the nearer term. If we look on the 1 month, we saw it consolidating here at the top, saw it sell off. Now it's kind of looking back to where it was here before it started to break above to newer highs. So we could see NVIDIA do that. The revenue growth is apparent. They've seen tremendous 100% year over year growth. They've got obviously AI leadership. So there's some fundamentals that look really good for their company. If we look on the longer term and we come back to this past 3 months and we go from this low all the way up to where we're at currently, it's pretty clear that we have this kind of consistent uptrend, right? Here's the support, here's the support. This is a support on October, beginning of October, and now in beginning of November, we see a support. And that's just good indication that we could see it continue in its upward direction. So really kind of a sound way to look at NVIDIA is that they are they're really starting to see massive growth ahead of AI. And that's something that we'd expect from a company like NVIDIA. So again, just to kind of look at the election impacts, mostly you want to just, do your own research. I encourage you guys to always vote. You have, one side that you can look at, and the other side that you can look at, but you have to pick one, right? So it's really important that you pick one, vote regardless. And I've been traveling tremendously, so it's been a tough time to actually get out to the polls this year. But what I can tell you is that if we have a government favorable of tech and innovation, right, in AI, then that could mean uh, well, really just a continued uptrend here on Nvidia. So do some research, look at both sides, take a look. Again, this pattern looks very consistent, and I could see us continuing up. If we do, let's just take a look at NVDX, right? So NVDX is, I believe, 2x of Nvidia. So if it continues in this trend that we're seeing here, right? We got support back in September to October to now. If we see it continue, and we also can mark up this resistance here pretty clearly. If we're on an info line, you can see we're at this support. If we see it get up to here on NVIDIA, NVDX, excuse me, that would be a 20% increase, right? These are the type of moves that you really look for to put your portfolio in a good position. We saw the same thing happen here back in earlier October when we were identifying NVIDIA. For those of you guys that aren't subscribed, or you're not in our Stockmate community, we go live in the morning, and you can watch me trade live. It's that second link in the description. And we actually pointed out NVIDIA. We talked about NVIDIA as a potential buy back here, beginning of October, for that 35% increase. Simply just identifying this pattern and then really just managing our risk and being able to capitalize on that. Now, you guys can see I was down 2.32%. We're in a small position on Microsoft, and that's why we're seeing that. But when we look at NVIDIA potential, again, that's a 20% potential, right? Absolutely huge for NVIDIA. MACD is looking good, and that's going to do it for NVIDIA. Again, do some research on both sides as the election impact kind of is going to hit that AI side of things. So let's get into Alphabet. We're looking at Google, right? So a couple things with Google stock. Election impact, right? First thing before we get into technicals, there's some potential shifts that we could see in antitrust laws that could directly impact Alphabet. You can, look at, for example, in Europe, we had a lot of privacy laws. You want to look at both sides, see which one's going to be, where a tech supportive government might ease the pressures on some of those antitrust laws. In contrast, you might have some stricter regulatory stance that could intensify the scrutiny and potentially be affecting their ad revenues, right? If there's what makes an ad company so successful, what makes Meta and Google so powerful for their ads? So they have so much data on people, right? So that's, you got to take that into account when you're looking at the elections and how that different policies could affect the ability for Google to provide or have that data on everyone, right? But as it stands right now, market cap, again, we're over $1 trillion, right? We're over 2 trillion. They're in a race to I think it's 4 trillion at this point. The ad revenues, right? They're hovering around $100 billion, right? They got some AI enhanced technology for their advertising. And you just got to think about AI affecting advertising. Obviously, it would make it more effective. And as they're kind of a leader in the AI space as well, you got to think about that's going to affect not just their advertising, it's going to affect their algorithms, how YouTube is a solid platform as you're watching this right now on YouTube. So, and then research and development. They spent over $30 billion in 2023, just with emphasis on AI. So they were a little bit ahead of the game since we've seen it really, AI really advance in 2024. And then I think they were over $50 billion invested in AI this year. I could confirm that, but I know they were 30 billion last year. Now, why? Machine learning. Because if they have machine learning, they have AI, they can really predict not just algorithms, but again, enhance their advertising. So, let's kind of take a look here on the year to date with Google. We pointed out Google earlier last week. So each week we have our weekly watch list, right? That we go over. In week 4 of October, we were kind of looking at this as a buy, right? Because we had identified this trend and that they were sitting at this previous support here that I can also map out horizontally here. It's this previous support that's acted as resistance. They were hanging out here, and we were looking to see them push up. They had crushed earnings where they did really well. We saw them push up yesterday after hours to $181 a share, and then sold off some of that after hours or yesterday into after hours, and today being about 171. They're retesting that moving average. We could see them retest that moving average. It's been pushed up above it. I think we're about to see if it continues its direction, similar to what we saw back here from March into the summer. We saw it pushed up using that moving average as support, and really making higher highs, as you could see. And then when we saw it peak out in July and it crossed below divergence, back below that moving average, then it was acting as a resistance. It was consolidating here since August, and then we saw it start to push up recently in the past 2 days tremendously, and now it's pushed up above that moving average. We could see it continue in this upward direction. And really, if we map out what the resistance looks like, let's just go on the 1 year here, and to take a look at that resistance, I think that we're kind of at a point still where we could see some big upside for Google. That's kind of hard to map out right there, but if we go down to here and we extend this guy down here, it's a little hard to see that red. I don't know if maybe I should get that into being more bright green. Yeah, that's better. And maybe even I can just drop this SMA for a second. You could see that, it's really been consistent on its uptrend, and now it's been consolidating, sitting right here at this support. We see higher lows, higher highs. And every time that we've seen it push up above this moving average, it's really stayed fairly consistent. Like right here, we saw it cross over, stay consistent. Same thing's happening right here. We saw it push up, kind of retesting. And now if we see it hold its trend, that would be, let's just take a look at what that info line looks like. We're talking about, on Google stock alone, about a 16% increase. All right, so aside from their earnings doing well and beating earnings, aside from some of their AI research and development that they've had, a 16% on the technicals is looking pretty bullish. And if we go over to GOOX here, we're looking at really what would be more, right? We're looking at more. It would be actually more in like the 35% range. If we get up to that previous high, yeah, we're around, okay, 25% on GOOX, which is the 2x bull for Google. So nothing that is too surprising with Google. We know that they've been tremendously bullish, but you just have to look at these, election impact again. Think about antitrust. Pick one side, and which one would be more lenient. I would imagine that there would be some more data regulation in regards to if we saw a Democratic Party. Now if we saw a Republican Party, you could see maybe a little bit more easing, not as much regulatory scrutiny around that. But again, you have to look at it like for Europe, that's something that's been really good for them to protect the consumer privacy. And then in other countries where they've been lenient, they haven't really noticed a huge difference. You have to look at both sides. Of course, if we had a Republican presidency, we could see more of an increase in Google because there would be less of a data. There would be more ease and pressure on regulatory uh, stance on the data, but you still have to look at both sides, right? Because even so, we've seen Google be really a force to be reckoned with throughout the entire Democratic uh, elections or presidency, right? So it hasn't really affected the overall stock price. You have YouTube, right? YouTube is one of those that is absolutely going to be kind of the backbone of their company. So really looking like technicals make sense, fundamentals make sense, and then of course weighing both sides as we laid out with the elections. In which one that you're picking or which one is the result. You have to think about that as well. So the next one we had here was Microsoft. Now, I took a Microsoft position. As you know, I'm down about 2.32%. We saw it sell off. It's simply what it looks like here is a retest. I'll get into technicals first on this one so I can show you guys what the trade looks like. But as you can see, we've been consistently making higher highs. No doubt about it. Microsoft has been really benefiting from ChatGPT and some of the innovations in AI. And, simply put, when you have the stock here, I was looking at what it was going to do here, and I thought it was going to most likely going to be bouncing here. But if I can shift this down to more like a 5-minute, we saw that even after it beat earnings, they had a positive earnings and revenue. They sold off from $430 down to $410 at this point. So, sometimes, and you can see right here is where I purchased. We had a purchase price right here after the sell-off I had purchased, and it's continued to sell off. And I'd like to share with you guys my losses too, right? I mean, we're up on the year. We're having a profitable year. We're just under 100%. Even on the week, we are up about 4%, but this one dropped us actually back down to 2%. But, this one was, hey, we're seeing it kind of push up. And if I add this moving average back, before I do that, you see this line here. This is our support that we're just looking at. I was anticipating that this was going to really continue to act as a support and that we were going to see it push up above. And if we add that indicator back, which is one of my favorites, right? We got the moving average and the simple moving average of what would be 200 days. And we could go green on that. Simply put, if we drop it back down to kind of a 3-month, right here, it was looking like we were seeing it push and stay above that moving average. Earnings came out, and surprisingly, we had it sell off. There's a couple reasons. We also had job reports come out, and that's why we saw some companies sell off. The market cap of Microsoft, they are in the run to the $4 trillion market cap. And the revenue really has grown 29% year over year. And it reflects their sustained demand for the AI, for their cloud solutions. You got Microsoft Teams, you got the PCs. And then they invested about $10 billion in OpenAI. So they're in that industry. But one of the things that forced the downward direction after this this earnings, even though they were in the green, was that we saw the job reports, and the job reports basically said they were better than last month, but they were still 30%. There's 30% more job cuts at this time this year than there was at this time last year. So year over year, we were seeing more job cuts. Factor that in. So that was some election volatility as well. Again, with Microsoft, they honestly they've been thriving, and they thrive under an administration that is focused on digital transformation, probably some cloud expansion, but new regulations around some data privacy, as we talked about with Google. Those data privacy, antitrust concerns could absolutely influence the stock performance, right? And that could be shaky, right? Because we could see that different policies on each side, not produce maybe a downward direction or even an upward direction, but some uncertainty, and that we could see it consolidate. And that's kind of exactly what we've seen happen. Like, we can map out this resistance there, and we can also map out this support, which was the resistance at one point, and we could see it may drop down here to 390 and then push back up and consolidate sideways for a bit, as it's already been doing since February, right? February to now. This whole year, really, from I guess quarter two into now getting to quarter four, is kind of this consolidation. But we've had some overall push-ups here up to 461. They experienced growth in their earnings, and the moving average hasn't really shifted downward. It's still on that continued upward direction, this 180 or 200-day moving average. So we're still indicating signs that it would continue its uptrend, but that is, obviously something that could happen. So we could see it move sideways, and that's kind of what's happening right now. Even if we move this one up, we drop it to that support, we could see that happening. And if we drop in what would be a shorter term Fibonacci, how do you do that? Well, you go from the top, the peak, you see that downtrend, it's making lower lows. And let me just drop this into, a 1 hour. So we see it making lower lows here since September. And then we see it push here. So take Fibonacci retracement, right? We come down to here, we see it sell off, go to the low, then we see where we would see it getting back to, which I would see it if we get back to this previous support here, kind of on the short term. We'd be looking at confirmation or a buy would be right here around $417, $415. Right now it's hovering around 410. I guess we could move it down a little bit. Yeah, 415 would be kind of the near term, unless you're looking for getting back to all-time highs, and then you'd have more confirmation if we got around $420 a share for Microsoft. So yeah, again, Microsoft, they're showing significant dedication to AI. So you have to keep that in mind, especially in today's day and age, and how fast that technology is advancing. Microsoft's one of the companies that would be one of the major players, as they've always been in the computer space. So that's something to consider. The other one that we got here, guys, so again, with Microsoft, it could be, if it continues uptrend, kind of not at a premium price, it could be a potentially good deal. That's why we have it here for November week 1. Let's take a look at Amazon. Now, we marked up Amazon earlier this week. I think it was last night we marked it up, actually. So it was after the sell-off, and we were actually saying, hey, this is a support. It just sold off. It's at a support. We see it push up to here. Yeah, I mean, it's stayed true to this pattern. The short term from kind of August to today it stayed quite consistent, right? But depending on the political landscape, right, if we have a election impact that we kind of look at with Amazon stock, Amazon, they're most likely going to encounter some varying regulatory requirements, and especially regarding the labor and antitrust. We had minimum wage lower on Amazon. They were paying workers less. So you got to think about how that would affect their profits, as if they don't have some extra money maybe to spend on their warehousing, right? They were paying. They've been known for satisfying their customer, and sometimes that comes at the cost of paying their employees less, and that's a trade-off that we've seen with them. But pro-business policies, if we see that, could facilitate some growth with Amazon. Well, if we saw stricter regulations, we could see some operational challenges. In any case, the market cap is, we're above 2 trillion, I believe, at this point. If we look, what are we at for market cap? We are at, just over 2 trillion, right? So they're pushed up And we have some AWS revenue. So of course you have, Amazon Prime, you got people buying on Amazon, but it's a really small margin, right? A lot of the money goes to sellers. They do take some, about 30%, but their margins are fairly slim on their domestic product. Where they've seen tremendous growth is with AWS, about 15% year over year growth. And that just kind of underscores Amazon's role in businesses, right? In models. So the cloud computing, getting into AI and things like that. Nevertheless, it's not like Prime membership isn't making most of their revenue. They have over 200 million Prime members as of recent, which is driving their retail and subscription revenue significantly. Um, and then let's take a look on kind of the longer term here on Amazon. What does it look like on the 5 year? Right, we've seen it really push below the moving average, and then as we got into 2023, it's kind of pushed above. And if we get rid of these smaller near-term investment outlooks, its overall direction has been up. Of course, since you could look 2015, it's been up, been volatile. Could we see that it's going to have a tremendous kind of downturn here, right? I wouldn't be surprised if you saw it sell off. When you look on this trend, of course, it looks like, yeah, we could continue up. But, when you look on the longer term, and if we bring it down from here, we drop that, which would be right here. Now we're looking at what could be an overextension of Amazon when you look on kind of the longer term. I'd say that's probably accurate. On the technicals, when you have a $2 trillion company, you have to ask yourself, it's worth $2 trillion. Is it intrinsic value? Is it really adding up? I was looking at the fair value for Amazon yesterday. We were hovering at $195 a share, which is they're at 197. So the intrinsic value, they're just a little bit above what their intrinsic value is worth. So not anything too crazy on financials versus their true stock price. But nevertheless, we could see this upward direction pull back, right? Especially if we see it cross over this moving average. As we've seen when it crossed over the moving average, we've seen it really, sell off. So where it's at right now, it's possible we could see it, cross over and start acting as resistance. We don't see it peak out too much. It's still continuing that upward direction. RSI on the longer term does look a little overbought, but I think in a nutshell, they've also experienced a lot of growth, and AI has really been a big part of that. So it's hard to tell with longer term. On the near term, it looks bullish. On a longer term trajectory, if we look on the past few years, it looks like, hey, is Amazon kind of it's quite up there right now. It's a large cap, right? So we have Jeff Bezos as it's a large cap stock. It's usually low risk. AMZD, so this is kind of the inverse, right? Amazon, I wanted to bring it in because if it did kind of continue that pattern, we would see it go kind of crazy here. We could potentially, just looking at the trend line, if you look on what it looks like, from the other side of things, and if it could be bearish, we're looking here, and it looks like maybe it's at a support on the inverse that we can see it push back up to. And in that event, I don't know that this is a 2x, but let's say that you shorted Amazon on the short term, that would be, 5% difference. There's definitely a pattern develop, but it's also to say, last time we were in this position was right here. And what happened, it continued as a bullish uptrend, right? This is the inverse. So it did continue. The stock price underlying asset continued up before selling off. And we could see the same thing happen here. And that's usually what happens when you have a stock that is experiencing growth. So last one I want to go over here, guys, was Palantir. Um, I've had a lot of requests about Palantir. Their market cap, let's just see where they're at. It's been a while since I've looked. 94 billion. Late 2023, they were at 20 billion market cap. So they've really been on a tear. The year over year, I think they're 60% in revenue. They got or over 60% of their revenue comes from government clients. So that includes critical deals with U.S. Defense and intelligence agencies. When you have AI, there's going to be some tech that's going to benefit the U.S. as well, of course. And then we have, revenues where we were in the millions, I think around 500 million late 2023. And when we look, where they're at today, I'm not surprised by the growth. There's a lot of articles looking at Palantir stock in the longer term. We saw Kathy Wood dump Palantir. CEO sold 254 million in shares, and that was in the last day. And then you also had some people say that in the election impact, right? It's a company with, like, just to overview, right? Before we even get into it, it's a company with a strong reliance on the government contracts, right? So Palantir's performance could, significantly be shifting depending on the government budget and priorities. If you had its continued budget that we have right now, then yeah, it's probably going to see continued growth. If we see what, you hear with Elon cutting costs because he's involved with the Republican Party, and you see less money. I don't know if that would be the thing that we'd see cut, right? AI, that's kind of a scary look, right? Because you got Palantir, who has the CEO has a relatively good relationship with Elon. Of course he does. But you have, significant, it introduces some risk because you want increased defense and data analytics. The government will want that, and Palantir is providing that. Well, on the other hand, so if we start pulling troops out of certain places, there's less, emphasis on AI in those areas. The budget cuts could introduce more risks for the stock. On the near term, it looks quite interesting. We got what was $45 a share down 8% to $42 a share. If we see it get back to previous highs here, we would be looking at about 8% increase. And that just happened. We're really talking about the last 2 days. So it's a really near term decrease that we've seen. And if we look on the year to date, right, kind of get a longer view, it's been on an absolute tear. I'd like to kind of look at the 3-month here, zoom out a little bit. That way you can kind of get an understanding. There's been some predictions that this stock could be up to $200 or more. And of course, we don't want to just listen to people, right? We got to do our own analysis. I think the fair value we saw was around $45 a share. Right now at 42. We're looking like a consistent uptrend. It recently pulled back. The RSI and the MACD were looking oversold. And then we see it now kind of at this support, busted below that SMA though. So, what happens when we push below the SMA completely like that? Let's take a look. What happened in the past? Right here, we've seen it start acting as resistance. Did continue its direction. Nevertheless, when you see it cross below that EMA, it does oftentimes act as resistance for some period of time. And that happened right here before quite a big sell-off, really. And so right now we just saw it push below. Are we going to start seeing it act as resistance? Maybe break this direct uptrend pattern, and see it pull back down to kind of here, right? And see a little more of a give in the stock before continuing its upward direction. Do I believe it's a long-term? I think it's a good long-term investment. Yes, absolutely. And do we think that it could continue in its current direction? It's possible. Might see a sell-off first, even more. But when it comes to tech, if you believe in the company in the more long-term, medium-term, it might be a more favorable buy at its current price, below the premium of $45, but still, still maybe a little bit over. It's grown a lot in the last 2 months, so it's got to take a look at. I think when we look at there's a continued demand for data analytics and those solutions, particularly in the government sectors. I mean, if we're seeing more advancements in AI, in tech, the United States takes tremendous action towards being on top of their technology, right? So there's a lot of, you look at pro-tech administration, could see that being, something that would push the price up. So election side, again, you got to pick one, but you got to look to, implications on both sides and how that's going to affect the market. So, to really dive in, you'd want, if you were looking for this to be going up, you'd probably want less budget cuts on the government. So, but you'd want pro tech, which we've seen recently. So you might be little more on the Democratic side, but it's kind of interesting because you have the CEO of Palantir, is actually, I don't know that he's great friends, but I know that he is well acquainted with more of the Republican side. So you could see less of a scrutiny, or there would be some more expansion that you might see on Palantir. But overall, they're positioned in a good spot, right? Good place to be in tech and AI right now in 2024 to be going into 2025 with that positioning is a fairly good place to be. So that's going to do it, guys, for these ones. We went over our top 5 for the week November. If you want to get the full breakdowns on each one and watch me trade live every single day at market open, I would encourage you guys to simply take a look at StockMe. It's that second link in the description. That's where you can watch me trade live. You get access to a lesson library of over 70 plus lessons on investing in tech and AI, fundamental analysis, technical analysis, as well as 2 books that I wrote for you to be able to get some insight into the markets and using the right tools to invest. So hopefully you guys enjoyed. I'll see you guys in the next